what can somebody do when they're in a situation with somebody who is, quote unquote, high conflict, to not lose their sense of self and then not lose respect for themselves, like when communicating with somebody like that?
Well, one thing we encourage is to give yourself an encouraging statement or self-talk and say things like, that's not about me. What they're saying is not about me, it's because of them. It's coming from them. They're blaming me because they're a blamer, not because I deserve to be blamed this intensely or whatever it is. Um, I am a good mother. I am a good father. I am a good worker. Uh, Telling yourself this stuff helps kind of reduce the volume of the criticism you're getting. So if you're around somebody that wants to criticize you all the time, is turn up the volume of what you're telling yourself, and it'll have less of an impact. And we do practice exercise, we do trainings and such, and coaching where people practice not kind of somewhat tuning out the intensity of other people's emotions so they're not
Right.
overwhelmed by them. So that's kind of number one. Also, what you say, you can calm a high conflict person for a few minutes by saying, hey, I can see this is a hard thing. Or, I can see your frustration, or I hear your disappointment, or whatever it is, so that you kind of connect with the person. And I don't say see high conflict people as enemies, just see them as someone that has a harder time with conflict.
Right. And you often hear you should never argue with people like that, or you can just tell something. You get more peace when you just know that somebody's wrong and you tell them they're right or whatever. You see these different sayings online now, which I have my own view on. That's another story for another day. That said, um, given how you've described people who are high conflict, um, do you think that people should still try to litigate with them when they're in a conversation? They try to express how they feel or go back and forth with them, or do you think that when you're dealing with a specific type of person, there's no point in doing so?
Let me give you four things that there's no point in doing with a high conflict person. One is arguing about the past. Just never going to make any progress. So if that's what you're saying, kind of relitigating what happened, if they're a high conflict person, you get nowhere. You total banging your head against the wall. I call that a forget about
Hmm.
it. Second is focusing on emotions. Don't focus on emotions because high conflict people are often overwhelmed with emotions. They kind of, once they get into emotions, the emotions take over the unmanaged emotions. So try not to make your discussion about, well, how do you feel? Or you should feel this way, or try to open that up. Third is don't try to change how they think. High conflict people have a rigid, narrow way of thinking. And so, whatever that is, they're not going to give up on that. That's like they really hold on to that. So, forget about the past, forget about emotions, forget about changing how they think. And you're wondering, well, then what do you do? So, you focus on the future, you focus on what to do. Let's look at our choices now. And so, someone's criticizing you because you left the cap off the toothpaste. You say, okay, let's talk about what our choices are now. Why don't we have two space tubes? I'll have mine and you can have yours, and I'll put the cap on mine. You can do whatever you want with yours. Or so rather than arguing about what's happened, or arguing about emotions, or arguing about how they think, is just talk about what should we do now? Let's talk about what our choices are. What should we do now? And so focus forward rather than focusing backwards. So convincing and arguing, yeah, with an ordinary person, you can do that. But with high conflict people, it's beating your head against the wall.
Right. And so, I would imagine there's a spectrum, right, with high conflict
Yeah.
people.
Oh, yeah.
Because
It's very
I
broad.
think obviously, in relationships, when people are getting to know each other, everybody has their own stuff that they see as being unhealthy. And, I think, sometimes you'll hear like the best way to get somebody to stop doing something is to stop reacting to that thing. Right. And
Yeah.
so, if that person understands that they can't get the same kind of reaction out of you they did before, it's not going to be worth them doing it. And then eventually I think people just change and like, all right, like I got to grow up a little bit and I got to stop behaving this way. So, if somebody's identified they're in a situation with somebody who is higher conflict, is it possible, not to change that person and who they are and their identity, but to like get them to change their behavior so that the relationship ends up working out?
It's worth trying. People
Okay.
say, how can you tell? And I say, try and see if you have success.
Mm-hmm.
And so say, I'd like you to do it this way instead of that way. Can we try that? And the other person said, well, that's really stupid, but I'll try it. And they try it and it works out. And so it's interesting. Most people change some. It's like 90% of people with ordinary personalities have a range of behavior that you can say, okay, like I teach law students once a
Mm-hmm.
year, and a lot of them are, say, around 30. And so I'll say, would you say that your personality has changed in the last 10 years? How many would say your personality's changed? Some in the last 10 years. And they all raise their hands. They say, I didn't used to speak up that much in class, and now I speak up more. Or I didn't used to, like go out in the water, and now I'm swimming and surfing and paddle boarding and all that stuff. High conflict people have a narrower range and don't do that. And you often see 10 years later the same behavior, unless for some reason they're really trying to change. So that's why I think it's worth giving it a try. Try it, have counseling, have discussions, give it a shot. And with some people, you will succeed because there is a spectrum. It isn't just a switch that's on or a switch that's off.
When is it time for somebody to walk away?
I think after you've tried everything. And so maybe you've gotten your own, like in a relationship, you got your own counseling. Maybe you tried couples counseling. Maybe the other person went, but nothing ever got better. Or maybe they refused to go. Maybe you found other people to enjoy more time with, and so you can cope with this relationship being somewhat unsatisfying. I have cases where, like, probable divorce cases, but person says, I'm going to wait another year or two and try to get along because the kids are in high school and I want to wait till they're out of high school. So I'm going to try to get along. And so they try that. They say, okay, I can do that for another year, but not for a lifetime. So it's a very personal decision. And I
Yeah.
never tell people what they should do. I say, here's the choices to look at, things to try.
And I think that from my understanding, there needs to be a strong emphasis on like working on yourself. I mean, no matter what, no matter if you're in a difficult relationship or if you're just, somebody who wants to remain single the rest of your life or you're happily married, whatever the example is, because I think the people that don't work on themselves for the most part, they will stay in relationships where they're being heavily mistreated because they feel that they can't do better than what they have. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think that happens. Although I've seen a lot of people who really worked hard on themselves and stayed in a relationship where the other person isn't working hard at all. And then they get to some point where, okay, I've done 10 years of good work on myself. I'm comfortable with who I am, and my partner still just does not like me, and we're just not getting along. So what I've learned about human behavior is there's a whole range of possibilities, and that there's a whole range of combinations. So you have the person who works hard on themselves and the other doesn't. You have the person who doesn't work hard on themselves because the other person doesn't. You have people who succeed with everybody else, but not with this particular partner. And that's usually because of the partner, not because of them. And I often look at that. I say, how are they doing with everybody else? They're flexible, they've got friends. A lot of high conflict people don't have friends. And that's
Mm,
part of the problem is they want everything out of the relationship and that you can't get everything out of a relationship. It helps to
yeah.
have friends have outside interests and support that.
Yeah, I would say that's a big red flag if somebody doesn't have any friends in their life. I mean, that's a huge red flag,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah,
Um, the other one that gets has gotten tossed around a lot as well is like histrionic personality disorder. I wasn't as familiar with this when I heard you talk about it. Um, I think on Andrew's podcast.
right.
Like how do you define that, and then how is it different than the other two?
Yeah, so histrionic is usually very dramatic, very emotional, but surface emotions. So, drama, drama, drama is
Hmm.
a lot the theme. A drive to be center of attention. They want everyone to look at them.
Hmm.
They may move in seductive ways or strange ways that kind of draw attention to themselves. In many ways, I think of Hollywood with histrionic because you can get paid in Hollywood to be dramatic.
Right, right,
And
right.
it doesn't mean everyone in Hollywood has a personality disorder. Most people don't, but there's some that probably do. But the idea is it's a lot of drama and emotion and surface kind of stuff. Now the difference from other personalities, like that's similar in some ways to borderline personality, where there's a lot of mood swings, etc. But histrionic doesn't have the rage, the anger, doesn't seem to go that direction. Also, histrionic is a smaller percent. The big study that I talk about, 6% narcissist, 6% borderline, said 2% histrionic. That this is
Oh
a
wow.
smaller percent. Yeah.
Right.
But what you notice is it may go with one of the others. Like a
Oh.
narcissist who's also histrionic may be really good at grabbing everybody's attention. And so, but when it's a disorder, the person really can't take care of themselves. Their
Hmm.
emotions are so dominant. And I've worked with families as a therapist and in divorce cases where a parent with a histrionic personality disorder has a child who's taking care of them, who's like, oh, mom, I'll fix this for you. And it's the parentified child. You got a 12-year-old that's doing discussing adult stuff. Mom, you got to sign this form. Mom, remember, you got to do your taxes, you know? And it's like the child's become the grown up, maybe even cooking for
Hmm.
mom because mom's like on the couch and just overwhelmed. Life is so hard. I can't cope. So when it becomes narrow and dysfunctional, um, and interferes with the person having a generally decent life, that's when you start seeing a personality disorder. But a lot of people have drama, so they don't all have personality disorder, and some people get paid well for it.
Yeah. And you're also describing things that are like I think normal in the day to day life. I
Yeah,
think people
yeah,
like attention. You know, people are gonna have some level of drama in their lives based on. I mean, I think if you're not having any kind of like tension in your life, you're not pushing yourself hard enough. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And you're just being passive and stagnant. You know, if you're not like doing things that challenge you and that might cause some issues at times where it's going to force you to change and develop as a human being. But I think what you're talking about is where it's like always something, and it's
yeah,
always like overly dramatic, overly emotional, and it's like you get in your gut, you get that gut feeling that like what's up with this? Like why does that person always need to X?
yeah. And there's no room for other people in there.
Right.
And so their drama is all consuming. And you feel like that, hey, she doesn't even know I'm here. Oh, by the way, I'm saying she. We think of histrionic as more of a female disorder. It's actually the big study came out 50-50 male and female because men can be dramatic, men can drive for center of attention and all of that as well. But when it becomes dysfunctional is when there's no room for anybody else and when it makes the person's life just not work. And that's the personality disorder. But there's something else very important I wanted to mention, and that is don't tell somebody you think they're a narcissist, borderline, histrionic. That's the fourth forget about. I said don't focus on the past, trying to give insight, opening up emotions, and don't label them. Don't say you're an abuser, you're a narcissist, you're this or that. It doesn't help, doesn't make things better. And if they are an abuser, talk to somebody else about how to deal with that and possibly get away from that.
Yeah.
But labeling the person never makes it better. So when I hear people say she's a histrionic or a borderline or he's a narcissist, that's really not helpful.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to mention within the context of some of the things that we've talked about today?
Just to give people hope. I
Mm-hmm.
think the more people understand about this, the people with tendencies towards these problems can get some help and will try to, make some changes. So in many ways, I see personality disorders as similar to addiction.
Yeah.
And we know a lot about treating addiction now. It's easier than treating a personality disorder. But as society learns, we've helped a lot of people overcome their addictions or be
Yeah.
in recovery. And we see people now starting, like people with borderline personality, in recovery from that.
Mm.
And I'm hopeful. I think knowledge is the key, and to be patient with each other and don't judge each other. Try to get help, and don't be negative about all of this. There's hope for the future.
This episode is brought to you by Element. Whether or not you're working out, hydration is so important. Water alone is key, but drinking water on its own sometimes just doesn't cut it. That's where Element electrolytes come in. They have formulated a science-backed electrolyte ratio that tastes absolutely amazing. Plus, doesn't have any sugar, artificial colors, or other sketchy ingredients to hold you back. I've been using Element for years, and my favorite flavor is definitely the citrus salt. I take it either first thing in the morning when I wake up or after a workout or a run. After taking it, I always feel replenished and ready to move on to the next thing I am doing. I know when I am properly hydrated, I perform and feel my best. So if you're looking to optimize your hydration, go to drinkelementT.com/DougBopst to get a free sample pack with any purchase. Again, go to drinkelementT.com/DougBopst or click the link below for a free sample pack with any purchase. Now back to the show.